This is the second time we kind of go through the details of the tabernacle. And the first time is at Mount Sinai when Moses basically almost word for word goes through this whole same thing again. But what's different is this time is them doing it. First they were being told the details, and I think we're repeating all these details again because it's showing they did do it exactly as they were being told. So it's a witness to that. And there's a lot of symbolism here, of course, and it's, a blueprint and a model of like, this is being prepared for God's to dwell with them in this tabernacle. And so it's a very unique thing in all the earth, and in all the world. The Lord choosing to dwell with these people. And it has to be done a certain way and in his way, not how we would see fit, but how he says it's to be done. Although there was room for creative expression by the way they created things, because it was very artistic, but it was supposed to be done in a very specific way. So like looking back at some of the details of this tabernacle, notice us like in our walk, as we're out here in these outer chambers, everything's bronze, and as we get closer to the Holy of Holies, it becomes more and more precious. We go from bronze and silver to everything being in gold. And I find it interesting as well, that everybody gave to the tabernacle. Everyone gave freely to all the instruments and everything that needed to be done for this tabernacle given. And I find it interesting that Moses at one time even says, no more, we've got plenty here. And I think that's kind of a stark contrast to our modern kind of religious movements today. It's like, when have you ever heard a pastor say, I don't need you to give anymore, that he could not come up with anything with using other people's money, but Moses, it was interesting that Moses had to tell him to stop giving, because everyone gave so freely. But looking back at some of kind of reverse engineering this tabernacle here, as we're looking again from the outside, working our way in, it kind of reflects our relationship as we move closer to God as well, where we hear his call and we're into that outer chamber. And now as we start moving closer into him, with the incense and the remembrance of the incense going on, and then the bread table, knowing that Yeshua is the bread of life, him being represented right there on the way into the Holy of Holies. And then him even being the glory of God that rests right there on that altar over the commandments of God that is given to him, the testimony, the witnesses, the covenant, that he dwells there literally in person. And that being Yeshua as well, right there in that Holy of Holies. And I find it interesting that even though into the Holy of Holies, the high priest only went in there once a year, during Yom Kippur, but the tabernacle had to be maintained continually, So, and that's just like our life here, is that we have to maintain our walk with the Lord continually until that day of Yom Kippur, Holy of Holies, standing at the judgment seat, So it's interesting that the priests were that, we look at, sometimes we're told that this is a burden, that following these commandments and this sacrificial system was a burden, but actually it wasn't given to them until they were freed from being slaves, just like our lives. Because we're free now, we choose to serve him. And it's not a burden, it's out of freedom that we choose to serve him. And they're celebrating this because they have come out of Egypt. We're coming into Passover right now. Just like our lives, we have come out of slavery, and he's delivered us from slavery. And he's calling us into the wilderness with him. He's drawing us closer to him. And he's calling us to serve him out of obedience because we are free, And those priests, in order to maintain it, they're still having to go in there, to keep the oil in the lampstands, and trim the wicks, and that's how we're supposed to maintain even our faith. It reminds us of some of the things about the virgins that we hear at the end times that didn't have their wicks trimmed, didn't have their oil, And so that's a reminder of us as well, is that we have to maintain our walk in our faith as we come into the Holy of Holies. And there's a lot of foreshadowing on all that. Christ is our living sacrifice. That now that he is the one time fulfilling the perfect sacrifice, and it's interesting that later on the temple is destroyed, from after Christ fulfills that mission. Even in a world today where we no longer have this tabernacle, we don't have this system here anymore. We don't have a temple where sacrifices can be made. But it's interesting how man's trying to redo that now. That even in end times, we know that they're ready to start building the tabernacle and all this in Jerusalem, that they think that they'll start the sacrifices back up again. But kind of my question is if we do that, are we certain we can do it in the exact way that God commanded it to be done? Even if they rebuild the temple in Jerusalem in the near future, the high priest, the only one that could do that, was supposed to be an heir of Aaron, so I don't know if would they find an heir of Aaron? Anyways, any way of doing it other than God says of doing it isn't going to be the correct way of doing it. He's very clear about all that. And that's what I like to urge us as we look at this and as we come now into Passover is reflecting on that of us, just like the Israelites, that he has called us out of Egypt. He's called us out of slavery. And the whole purpose that he's done that, the whole trouble that they went through, all that was the fact that God wanted to dwell with his people. That's the ultimate purpose of all of this. And that's the ultimate purpose at the end of the days that we have to look forward to is the exact same thing. God wants to dwell with his people, and he will dwell with it. It's only been 3 or 4 times, once back in the Garden of Eden, once here in this tabernacle, once when Yeshua literally on earth, and now with his return. And all of these things are focusing towards that and that purpose. But it is remarkable that whoever has a generous heart, let him bring the Lord's contribution. And the generous heart is because we are saved and we're brought out of slavery. But it's interesting how, like I was saying, the whole world sees it as a complete opposite. They literally see it as a completely opposite. That freedom is a burden, they tell us. They encourage lawlessness, And it reminds me, I was looking at, I had my little note here, Psalm 84:10. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. Just to be there, a doorkeeper, just to be part of maintaining that tabernacle, maintaining that walk, is so much more better than dwelling in a tent of wickedness. Also looking at some of the symbolism, the menorah, the lampstand being the tree of life, the altar of incense, and the table of showbread, where they put 12 loaves. That has to be done every week, maintaining those loaves of bread every week. But then also thinking of the lamp's head, that it's indicative to, as we look in the book of Revelations, the 7 spirits, the 7 churches. We were told to keep those lights lit, to keep those wicks trimmed. And then again, God being the bread of life, that offering being shown right there before the Holy of Holies. And also the altar of incense, to think of the altar of incense as the prayers that we give up to God, and just as the sacrifices that God enjoyed it, that he would smell the aroma. That's bringing us to his remembrance. And a little bit on that, Psalms 141:2.
Oh, sorry, one. Psalm of David. O Lord, I call upon you. Hasten to me. Give ear to my voice when I call to you. May my prayer be counted as incense before you, the lifting up of my hands as the evening offering.
Yeah. So again, looking at that picture of the tabernacle, that our prayers are lifted up. And then another one, Revelation 5:8.
When he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and a golden bowl full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints.
So again, the bowl of incense is the prayers of the saints, even there in heaven. This is a blueprint of what is in heaven, this tabernacle. In James 5:16.
Therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much.
So again, those prayers. And it's interesting too, when Yeshua had died on the cross and with his resurrection, they talked about how that veil was torn and that we can now access. It didn't divide the Gentiles and the Jews anymore. That curtain, that man-made curtain that they had in the temple. I think that's what the curtain that was torn. I think the curtain into the Holy of Holies, with the curtain out there in the outer court. Hebrews 10:19-20 refers to that.
Therefore, brethren, since we have confidence to enter the holy place by the blood of Yeshua, by a new and living way which he inaugurated for us through the veil that is his flesh. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a sincere heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water.
So again, Yeshua then being that ultimate sacrifice. And because of that, and coming out and living in slavery for so long, that now that we have that redemption from Yeshua, that makes us want to dwell with him and follow his ways so that we can dwell with him. Essentially, too, that God asked for them to give abundantly, in the gold and silver and the bronze being some of the most precious things that you have in life. So that kind of the question is what do we give? What do we offer? Our most precious thing is our life, our time, and our loyalty.